The classroom buzzed with excitement as the clock ticked closer to lunchtime. 25 fifth graders fidgeted in their seats, some doodling in notebooks, others staring longingly at the door. Ms. Peterson stood at the front of the colorful classroom, trying to hold their attention for just a few more minutes. "Before we break for lunch," she announced, clapping her hands twice to get their attention, "I have something exciting to share with you all." The children perked up, their eyes now fixed on their teacher. "Next Friday will be our annual career day." Ms. Peterson smiled widely. "Your parents or family members can come to class and talk about their jobs. It's a chance to learn about all the amazing careers you might want to pursue someday." A wave of whispers and excited chatter spread through the classroom. Ms. Peterson handed out bright yellow permission slips with all the details for parents. In the third row, second seat from the window, sat Alex. He was a bright-eyed, thoughtful boy with a shy smile who usually kept to himself. When Ms. Peterson mentioned career day, Alex's face lit up. For the first time in weeks, he raised his hand without being called on. "Yes, Alex?" Ms. Peterson looked surprised. "My dad just got a new position," Alex said, his voice a little stronger than usual. "I really want him to come." Ms. Peterson nodded with a smile. "That's wonderful. What does your father do?" Alex straightened in his chair, a proud smile spreading across his face. His father rarely talked about work details at home, but Alex knew enough to make him swell with pride. His dad worked hard, often leaving early and coming home late. Sometimes he missed baseball games and school events, but Alex understood why. His dad was doing important work. When the final bell rang that afternoon, Alex raced home, yellow permission slip clutched tightly in his hand. He burst through the front door, nearly knocking over his mom who was carrying a basket of laundry. "Whoa there, what's got you so excited?" His mom laughed, setting down the basket. "Mom, we're having career day next Friday, and I want Dad to come talk about his job." Alex waved the paper frantically. "Everyone will think it's so cool." His mother took the permission slip, reading it carefully. "That sounds like a great idea. Your dad will be home for dinner tonight. We can ask him then." Alex spent the next few hours imagining how impressed his classmates would be when they learned what his father did for a living. He pictured their wide eyes and dropped jaws. Maybe Riley and Jackson would finally invite him to play basketball with them at recess. Maybe Zoe would stop saying he made things up for attention. When Alex's father finally came home that evening, he was tired but smiled warmly when Alex rushed to hug him. Dad, we're having career day next Friday, and I want you to come talk about your job." Alex blurted out, words tumbling over each other in his excitement. His father raised an eyebrow, glancing at his wife. "Career day, huh?" "It would mean a lot to him," his mother said quietly. Alex's father knelt down to eye level with his son. "You know I can't talk about most of what I do, right? There are rules about what information I can share." "I know, Dad, but you can talk about the cool parts, right? About catching bad guys and protecting people. The other kids never believe me when I tell them what you do." His father's face grew serious. "Do the other kids give you a hard time about it?" Alex looked down at his sneakers. "Sometimes. They say I'm making it up." Ms. Peterson never says anything when they do that. A look passed between Alex's parents, a look that contained worry, understanding, and something else, determination. "Well," his father said after a moment, "I suppose I could take an extended lunch break next Friday. I'll have to clear a few things with my supervisor first." Alex threw his arms around his father's neck. "This is going to be the best career day ever. Nobody will laugh at me after they meet you." That night, Alex could barely sleep. He imagined standing in front of the class, proudly introducing his father, the FBI agent. He pictured Ms. Peterson's face when she realized he'd been telling the truth all along. He couldn't wait to see the look on everyone's faces when his dad showed them his badge. Little did Alex know that career day would turn out nothing like he imagined. It would be even more memorable, but for entirely different reasons. 3 days before career day, Ms. Peterson decided to make a list of all the parents who would be coming to speak. She wanted to organize the presentations in a way that would keep the children engaged throughout the day. "All right, class," she said, tapping her pen against her clipboard. "Let's go around the room. Tell me what your parents do for work and if they'll be joining us on Friday." The students sat up straighter, eager to share. My mom is a nurse at Central Hospital, said a girl in the front row. She's bringing her stethoscope so everyone can listen to their heartbeats. Ms. Peterson smiled, writing it down. How wonderful! The children will love that. My dad owns the pizza shop downtown, another boy announced proudly. He said he might bring some samples. This caused a ripple of excitement through the classroom. Ms. Peterson continued around the room as children shared about their parents, who were mechanics, office workers, store managers, and teachers. When she reached Alex's row, his heart began to pound. He had been waiting for this moment all week. His dad had confirmed last night that he could come, though he explained he would need to be careful about what details he shared. Alex, Ms. Peterson said, "What does your father do?" Alex stood up, just like the other students had. He took a deep breath and said clearly, "My dad works for the FBI as a special agent." The classroom fell completely silent. Alex could feel all eyes on him. Then Ms. Peterson did something unexpected. She laughed. Not a small chuckle, but a dismissive laugh that made Alex's stomach twist into a knot. "Oh, Alex," she said, shaking her head. "We're supposed to be truthful about what our parents really do, not make up stories to impress everyone." She looked around at the class with a smile. "Let's stick to reality, shall we?" Several classmates began to snicker. Riley whispered loudly to his friend, "Told you he was lying." Zoe rolled her eyes dramatically. Alex felt his face grow hot. His hands trembled slightly as he remained standing, confused by his teacher's reaction. "But he really is," Alex said, his voice smaller now. "He has a badge and everything." Ms. Peterson's smile faded slightly. "Alex, please sit down. If you don't want to share what your father actually does, that's fine. But making up stories isn't appropriate." "I'm not making it up," Alex insisted, feeling tears threatening to form. He blinked hard, determined not to cry in front of everyone. "That's enough," Ms. Peterson said firmly. "Let's move on. Tyler, what about your parents?" Alex sank into his seat, wishing he could disappear. The rest of the day passed in a blur. During lunch, he sat alone at the end of a table, pushing his food around with his fork. A couple of kids walked by, whispering and glancing his way. "Hey, Agent Alex," one boy called out mockingly. "Seen any aliens lately?" "Maybe his dad works with James Bond," another added, causing more laughter. On the playground, Alex found a quiet spot beneath a tree and stayed there until recess ended. He thought about what his father had told him about his job, not the classified details, but the parts about helping people and keeping them safe. His dad was a hero, even if nobody believed him. During the last period of the day, Ms. Peterson handed out art supplies for a project. When she reached Alex's desk, she paused. "You know, Alex," she said quietly, "it's okay to be proud of what your parents do, whatever that might be. But it's important to be honest." Alex looked up at her, meeting her eyes directly. "I am being honest, Ms. Peterson." Something in his steady gaze made her hesitate, but she simply placed the art supplies on his desk and moved on. When the final bell rang, Alex gathered his things slowly. He carefully folded the career day permission slip and tucked it into his backpack. His dad had already signed it. Despite what happened today, Alex knew the truth, and soon everyone else would know it too. As he walked toward the school bus, he made a decision. He wouldn't tell his parents what Miss Peterson had said. He didn't want them to worry or feel bad. But deep down, he couldn't wait for career day to arrive, the day when everyone, especially Miss Peterson, would have to believe him. Alex dragged his feet as he walked up the driveway to his house. Usually he raced home, eager to tell his mom about his day, but today was different. The weight of what happened in class sat heavy on his small shoulders. He paused at the front door, took a deep breath, and put on his best, "everything is fine" face before turning the doorknob. "Hey, sweetie, how was school?" His mother called from the kitchen. The smell of freshly baked cookies filled the air. On any other day, Alex would have rushed straight to the kitchen, but today he just dropped his backpack by the door. "It was okay," he mumbled, heading toward the stairs. His mother, Dr. Lisa Johnson, appeared in the hallway wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. As a pediatrician, she had a sixth sense for when children were hiding something. She took one look at her son's slumped shoulders and knew immediately that something was wrong. "Alex, what's going on?" she asked gently. "Nothing, Mom. I'm just tired." He didn't make eye contact. Lisa walked over and gently placed a hand on his forehead. No fever. Are you feeling sick? I'm fine, really. Alex tried to move past her toward the stairs. His mother crossed her arms. Alexander Thomas Johnson, I've known you your entire life. I know when something's bothering you. Maybe it was the use of his full name, or maybe it was just that he couldn't hold it in anymore, but suddenly Alex's eyes filled with tears. He tried to blink them away, but they spilled over, running down his cheeks. Honey. His mom pulled him into a hug. What happened? Between sobs, the whole story came tumbling out. How Ms. Peterson had laughed at him in front of everyone, how the kids had teased him at lunch, how no one believed that his dad worked for the FBI. She made me look like a liar, Mom, he hiccuped. She didn't even ask if I was telling the truth. She just decided I was making it up. His mother's expression shifted from concern to anger. She led Alex to the couch and sat beside him, holding his hand. Listen to me, she said firmly. You did nothing wrong. Your father does work for the FBI, and Miss Peterson had no right to embarrass you like that. She handed him a tissue. Does Dad know about this? Alex shook his head. I didn't want to bother him. He's so busy. This isn't a bother, Alex. This is important. Lisa checked her watch. Your father should be home in about an hour. We'll talk to him then, okay? Alex nodded, feeling a little better now that his mom knew. How about you help me finish those cookies while we wait? She suggested, knowing that keeping busy would help. An hour later, they heard the front door open. I'm home, called a deep voice. Dad. Despite everything, Alex couldn't help feeling excited to see his father. He ran to the entryway. David Johnson, still in his work suit, set down his briefcase to scoop his son into a hug. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and kind eyes that missed nothing. What's this? He asked, noticing Alex's red-rimmed eyes. He looked at his wife, who gave him a look that clearly said, We need to talk. Let's all sit down, Lisa suggested. In the living room, Alex once again recounted what had happened at school. As he spoke, his father's expression remained calm, but Lisa recognized the controlled anger in her husband's eyes. When Alex finished, David took a deep breath. Son, I'm sorry that happened to you. It wasn't fair, and it wasn't right. Nobody believes me, Alex said quietly. They all think I'm just some kid making up stories. David placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Well, they're wrong, and on Friday, they'll find out just how wrong they are. You're still coming. Alex looked up hopefully. Wild horses couldn't keep me away, David assured him. But first, I think your mother and I need to have a conversation with Ms. Peterson and the principal. Lisa nodded in agreement. I'll call the school first thing tomorrow morning to set up a meeting. David leaned forward, his expression serious. Alex, I want you to know something. What happened today? Sometimes people make assumptions based on what they see, not who a person really is. You mean because I'm black? Alex asked. He was young, but not too young to understand how the world sometimes worked. David nodded slowly. Sometimes people don't expect certain things from us. They have pictures in their heads about who can do what job. And sometimes they don't even realize they're thinking that way. Is that why Ms. Peterson didn't believe me? Maybe, his father said. But what matters is that you know the truth. And soon, everyone else will too. For the first time since school ended, Alex smiled a little. I can't wait to see her face when you show up. Later that evening, after Alex had gone to bed, David and Lisa sat at the kitchen table, talking in hushed voices. A pot of tea sat between them, steam rising from their barely touched cups. I'm still so angry about this, Lisa said, shaking her head. How dare she humiliate our son in front of the entire class? David reached across the table and took his wife's hand. I know. I am too. But we need to think about how to handle this in a way that helps Alex and maybe changes something at that school. Lisa squeezed his hand. You're right. I hate seeing him hurt like this. Me too. David's voice was quiet but firm. But this is a teaching moment, not just for Miss Peterson, but for the school, maybe even for Alex. They fell silent for a moment, both thinking about their son sleeping upstairs, how his excitement about career day had turned into embarrassment and shame. You know, David said finally, What happened to Alex happens to black children every day in classrooms across the country. Teachers who make assumptions, who don't believe in their potential, who dismiss their truths without a second thought. Lisa nodded. I see it in my practice all the time. Black mothers whose concerns for their children are ignored until it's almost too late. It's exhausting having to constantly prove ourselves. That's why I think we need to approach this differently, David said. We could go in there angry, demand that Ms. Peterson be disciplined. And what would that accomplish? She deserves to be disciplined, Lisa countered, but there was less heat in her voice. Maybe, but I'm thinking longer term, David replied. What if we use this as an opportunity to open her eyes? To help her see her biases? Maybe then she'll think twice before doing this to another child. Lisa took a sip of her tea, considering her husband's words. So what's your plan? I think we should still request that meeting with the principal, David said. But instead of going in demanding consequences, we go in seeking understanding. I want to hear what Ms. Peterson has to say for herself. And then I still show up for career day, just as planned. A small smile crossed David's face. I think seeing me in person with my credentials will be lesson enough. Lisa couldn't help but smile too. She's going to be mortified. Probably. But the goal isn't to embarrass her the way she embarrassed Alex. The goal is to make her think, to make her reflect on why she was so quick to dismiss what our son said as a lie. They continued talking, mapping out how they would approach the meeting, what points they wanted to make sure came across. It was nearly midnight when they finally headed upstairs to bed. The next morning, Lisa called the school as soon as the office opened. She explained the situation calmly but firmly to the secretary, who transferred her to the principal, Dr. Winters. Dr. Johnson, the principal, said, I'm very sorry to hear about this incident. Of course we can arrange a meeting. Would tomorrow morning at 8:30 work for you and your husband? That would be fine, Lisa replied. Thank you for taking this seriously. After hanging up, Lisa texted David with the meeting details. He responded immediately. I'll be there. Already cleared it with my supervisor. Lisa smiled at her phone. David had always put family first, even with his demanding job. It was one of the many reasons she loved him. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, Alex hovered nearby, clearly anxious. Is Ms. Peterson going to get in trouble? He asked, picking at a loose thread on his shirt. David looked at his son thoughtfully. This isn't really about getting anyone in trouble, Alex. It's about making things right. About helping Ms. Peterson understand why what she did was hurtful. What if she doesn't listen? What if she still thinks I'm lying? Lisa stopped chopping vegetables and turned to face her son. That's why we're bringing your dad with us tomorrow, so she can see for herself that you were telling the truth. Alex still looked worried. What about the other kids? They've all laughed at me too. That's why career day is so important, David explained, putting an arm around Alex's shoulders. Everyone will see the truth then, and you know what? It's okay if some of them don't apologize right away. Sometimes people need time to process when they've been wrong about something. Alex leaned against his father's side. I just want them to know I wasn't making it up. They will, David promised. And maybe this will teach everyone a valuable lesson about not judging people too quickly. As they sat down to dinner, Alex seemed lighter, more at ease than he had been since coming home from school the day before. The knowledge that his parents believed him, that they were taking action, had restored some of his confidence. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation with Ms. Peterson. But tonight, surrounded by the love and support of his family, Alex felt ready to face whatever came next. The next morning arrived with a clear blue sky. David adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror, making sure his appearance was professional and polished. He had chosen his best suit, the one he wore for court testimonies and important meetings at work. Ready? Lisa asked, grabbing her car keys. She had rescheduled her morning appointments at the clinic to make time for this meeting. David nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. They dropped Alex off at his classroom. Before leaving, David knelt down and straightened his son's collar. Remember, head up, he said quietly. No matter what happens in this meeting, you told the truth. Never be ashamed of that. Alex nodded, giving his dad a quick hug before heading into class. Miss Peterson was at her desk and looked up as Alex entered. Her smile faltered slightly when she noticed David and Lisa standing in the doorway. "Miss Peterson," Lisa called, "we'll see you in the principal's office in 5 minutes." The teacher's face paled slightly as she nodded. Principal Dr. Winters was already waiting when David and Lisa arrived at her office. She stood to greet them, extending her hand first to Lisa, then to David. "Dr. and Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming in this morning," she said, gesturing toward the chairs opposite her desk. "Actually," David said politely, "it's Special Agent Johnson." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his credentials, displaying his FBI badge and ID. Dr. Winters' eyes widened. "Oh no, I see." She cleared her throat. "Well, thank you both for bringing this matter to my attention. I've asked Miss Peterson to join us as well." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Miss Peterson entered, her usual confidence noticeably dimmed. She froze momentarily when her eyes landed on David, taking in his professional appearance and the badge still visible in his hand. "Please have a seat, Miss Peterson," Dr. Winters said. The teacher lowered herself into the remaining chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I understand there was an incident in your classroom regarding Alex," Dr. Winters began. Miss Peterson's eyes darted between the 3 adults. "I'm not sure I would call it an incident," she said carefully. "We were discussing career day and—" "You called my son a liar," Lisa interrupted, her voice calm but firm, "in front of his entire class." Miss Peterson flushed. "I never used that word. I simply thought he was exaggerating." David leaned forward slightly. "And why did you think that? What about my son's claim seems so unbelievable to you?" The question hung in the air. Miss Peterson struggled to find words, suddenly aware of how her assumptions might look to the others in the room. Well, it's just that FBI agents are quite rare and—" "And what?" David prompted when she trailed off. Miss Peterson looked down at her hands. "I made an assumption. I was wrong. I apologize." "The apology needs to be directed to Alex," Lisa said. "He's the one who was humiliated in front of his peers." Dr. Winters, who had been listening carefully, spoke up. "I completely agree. Miss Peterson, I expect you to apologize to Alex today. But I also think we need to address the broader issue here." She turned to David and Lisa. "I want you to know that our school does not tolerate this kind of behavior. We pride ourselves on creating an inclusive environment where all students feel respected and believed." "With all due respect," David said, "that's not what happened here. My son wasn't believed, and we have to ask ourselves why." Dr. Winters nodded slowly. "You're right, and it's a conversation we need to have with our entire staff." Miss Peterson looked genuinely distressed now. "I never meant to. I didn't think I was." She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry. Truly. I should have given Alex the benefit of the doubt, just as I would any other student." "Just as you would any other student," David repeated quietly. "That's exactly right." Lisa reached for her husband's hand. "We're not here to demand that Ms. Peterson be punished. We're here because we want Alex and every child in this school to be given a fair chance, to be believed, to be respected." Dr. Winters nodded firmly. "I couldn't agree more. In fact, I'd like to propose that we use this as an opportunity for growth. Perhaps, Special Agent Johnson, you might consider expanding your career day presentation to include a discussion about assumptions and respect." David exchanged a look with Lisa before nodding. "I think that could be arranged." As the meeting concluded, Ms. Peterson approached David and Lisa. Her earlier defensiveness had given way to genuine remorse. "I truly am sorry," she said. "I'll make this right with Alex, I promise." Walking out of the school building, Lisa squeezed David's hand. "That went better than I expected." David nodded. "The real test will be tomorrow, career day." Neither of them could have predicted just how memorable that day would turn out to be. Career day arrived with a buzz of excitement in the air. The hallways of Oakwood Elementary were decorated with colorful posters showing different professions. Parents in business suits, medical scrubs, construction gear, and various uniforms walked through the school doors, some looking nervous, others smiling confidently. Alex woke up earlier than usual that morning. He carefully picked out his best clothes, a button-up shirt his grandmother had given him for his birthday, and his least-worn pair of jeans. He combed his hair neatly and even polished his shoes with a tissue. "Someone's looking sharp today," his mother commented as he came downstairs for breakfast. "I want to look good for Dad's presentation," Alex explained, pouring himself a bowl of cereal. When they arrived at school, Alex spotted Miss Peterson standing just inside the entrance, greeting parents. Yesterday afternoon, she had pulled him aside and apologized, her voice sincere as she admitted she'd been wrong to dismiss what he'd said about his father. Alex had accepted her apology with a quiet nod, but things still felt awkward between them. "I'll see you later, honey," Lisa said, kissing the top of Alex's head. Dad should be here around 11:30 for his presentation. Alex headed to his classroom, where several parents were already setting up small displays on the desks. The morning presentation started with Tyler's mom, who was a veterinarian. She brought in x-rays of animals and even a friendly therapy dog that the kids could pet. Next came a local firefighter, a web designer, and a chef who handed out cookies he had baked that morning. "All right, class," Ms. Peterson announced around 11:25, "we have one more presenter before lunch. Alex's father is joining us to talk about his work with the FBI." A murmur ran through the classroom. Alex noticed several kids exchanging surprised glances. Riley, who had teased him the most, looked particularly shocked. The classroom door opened and David walked in. He was dressed in a crisp, dark suit with his FBI badge clipped to his belt. His presence immediately commanded attention, professional, authoritative, but with a warm smile for the children. "Good morning, everyone," he said. "I'm Special Agent David Johnson, and I work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Alex sat up straighter in his seat, unable to contain the proud smile spreading across his face. Ms. Peterson stepped forward. "We're so pleased to have you with us today, Special Agent Johnson. Children, let's give Mr. Johnson our full attention." David nodded his thanks and began setting up a small display he had brought, a poster board with photos of FBI headquarters, agents working in different departments, and some child-friendly information about what the FBI does. "The FBI is a federal law enforcement agency," David explained, using simple terms. "We investigate crimes that break federal laws. Those are laws that apply to the entire country, not just one state or city." He showed them pictures of different FBI roles, agents working with computers, in laboratories, with dogs, and even underwater. "Many people think FBI agents just chase bad guys all day," David said with a smile, "but our work is much more varied than what you see in movies and TV shows. My particular job focuses on cybersecurity. That means I help protect important computer systems from people who might try to hack into them." A forest of hands shot up. David called on a girl in the front row. "Have you ever been in a shootout?" she asked eagerly. David chuckled. "No, and we try very hard to avoid situations like that. Most FBI work is about collecting information, analyzing evidence, and working with other agencies to solve problems." "Do you have a gun?" asked a boy near the window. "I'm trained to use one, yes, but that's not the most important tool I have," David replied, tapping his temple. "This is. Our brains and how we solve problems are much more valuable than any weapon." The questions continued, each one more enthusiastic than the last. David answered them patiently, occasionally catching Alex's eye and giving him a small wink. Then Riley raised his hand. "Why didn't you just tell us Alex was telling the truth?" he asked Miss Peterson. A hush fell over the classroom. Miss Peterson's face flushed, but to her credit, she didn't dodge the question. "That's a fair question," she said. "I made a mistake. I assumed something without checking if it was true, and that was wrong of me." David nodded approvingly before addressing the class. "You know, that's actually something important I wanted to talk about today. In my job, one of the worst mistakes you can make is jumping to conclusions without evidence." He walked to the front of the classroom, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes we all make assumptions about people based on how they look, where they come from, or what we expect of them. But those assumptions can be wrong, and they can hurt people." Alex watched as his classmates listened intently, some nodding in understanding. "Part of my job is to uncover the truth," David continued. "And the truth isn't always what we expect it to be. That's why it's so important to keep an open mind and really listen to people, even if what they're saying seems surprising at first." As the presentation wrapped up, The children applauded enthusiastically. Ms. Peterson thanked David warmly, her earlier embarrassment replaced by genuine appreciation. Alex couldn't remember ever feeling so proud. As the class lined up for lunch, several kids crowded around him. "Your dad is so cool," one girl exclaimed. "Does he let you see his badge at home?" another asked. Even Riley approached sheepishly. "Sorry I didn't believe you," he mumbled. "Your dad's job is pretty awesome." In the weeks that followed Career Day, changes rippled through Oakwood Elementary School like stones thrown into a still pond. What had started as one teacher's mistake had turned into something bigger, something that touched the entire school community. The Monday after Career Day, Principal Dr. Winters called a special staff meeting. Teachers filed into the library, curious about the urgent notice they'd received. Ms. Peterson sat quietly in the back row, her usual spot now feeling uncomfortably exposed. "I've asked you all here," Dr. Winters began, "because an incident last week brought something important to my attention, something we need to address as a school." She didn't name Ms. Peterson or Alex directly, but she didn't need to. Word had spread quickly among the staff. "We're launching a new training program," Dr. Winters announced. "It's called Seeing Every Child, and it's about recognizing and addressing unconscious bias in the classroom." Some teachers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others nodded in agreement. Miss Peterson stared at her hands, feeling both ashamed and, strangely, relieved that something positive might come from her mistake. The training began the following week. It wasn't just a single workshop that everyone could forget about afterward. It was ongoing, discussion groups, reading materials, and regular check-ins about classroom practices. For Alex, school became different in small but important ways. He noticed that Miss Peterson called on him more often during class discussions. She listened more carefully to all the students, especially the quieter ones. Once, when a new student didn't believe that another boy's mother was a commercial airline pilot, Miss Peterson stepped in immediately. "In this classroom," she said firmly, "we believe each other unless we have a good reason not to. And someone's job sounding unusual isn't a good reason." Alex smiled to himself when he heard that. At home, Alex's parents noticed the change in their son. The slumped shoulders were gone. He talked excitedly about school again, sharing stories about his day at dinner. He was making new friends too. Kids who had previously ignored him now invited him to play basketball during recess. "You know," Lisa said to David one evening after Alex had gone to bed, "something good really did come out of all this." David nodded, looking up from his laptop. "It's not just about Alex anymore. It's about all the kids at that school who might have been dismissed or disbelieved. Maybe things will be different for them now." 6 months later, when the school year was coming to an end, Dr. Winters approached David with an unusual request. "We're expanding our career day next year," she explained, "making it more of a career week with deeper discussions about different professions, but also conversations about respect, assumptions, and treating everyone fairly." She smiled. "Special Agent Johnson, would you consider coming back? Not just to talk about the FBI, but to help lead a session for the older students about evidence versus assumptions, about not jumping to conclusions." David didn't hesitate. "I'd be honored." On the last day of school, Alex brought home his report card. His grades were excellent, but what made him most proud was Ms. Peterson's comment at the bottom. "Alex has taught me as much this year as I hope I've taught him. His honesty and resilience are an inspiration." That summer, Alex attended a 2-week junior science camp at the local community center. On the first day, during introductions, the instructor asked each child to share something interesting about their family. When it was Alex's turn, he stood up straight, looked around the circle of new faces, and said clearly, "My dad works for the FBI as a special agent." This time, no one laughed. Instead, a chorus of "wow" and "that's so cool" rippled through the group. One boy asked eagerly, "Really? What kind of cases does he work on?" Alex smiled. "He works in cybersecurity, protecting important computer systems. He says the most important tool isn't a gun or handcuffs, it's your brain and how you solve problems." He could almost hear his father's voice as he said those words. And for the first time, he fully understood the lesson his dad had been teaching him all along. The truth would always speak for itself if only people would listen. As for Ms. Peterson, she returned to Oakwood Elementary the following year a changed teacher. The mistake that had once filled her with shame had become the catalyst for her best teaching yet. She started each new school year by telling her students, "In this classroom, everyone deserves to be heard, everyone deserves to be believed, and everyone has something important to teach us, including me."